je suis resté ici pendant 2 ans, puis après ça, je suis revenu. But first, I don't know I'm going to be tall because of my mother.
By the early 1990s, André the Giant was no longer just the unstoppable force fans remembered. Behind the cheers and legendary status, his body was failing, and the pain never truly left. Years of wrestling, constant travel, and a condition that kept his bones growing had pushed him to the edge. As his career faded, those closest to him began to notice the change, physically, emotionally, and mentally. What followed in his final days was a quiet, heartbreaking decline that few truly understood. And when the end finally came, it didn't just shake the wrestling world. It devastated the woman who stood beside him. The lonely rise of André. The 1980s WWE felt like a neon-soaked fever dream. Loud, colorful, and completely over the top. It was a time when wrestling didn't just entertain. It dominated living rooms. Kids and adults alike sat glued to their televisions, watching characters that felt more like comic book heroes than athletes. Barbers became superstars. Macho men lived exactly how they talked. Hitmen dismantled opponents with surgical precision. And at the center of it all stood Hulk Hogan, radiating larger-than-life energy. But while the spotlight often followed Hogan, the true foundation of that era was André the Giant. If Hogan was the sun, André was the gravity holding the entire universe together. Long before André became a global icon, his size had already set him apart. Born André Roussimoff in 1946 in Coulommiers, France, he made an impression the moment he entered the world. He weighed 13 pounds at birth, and his father reportedly looked at his massive hands and immediately sensed destiny at work. Being unusually large wasn't entirely new to the family either. While André's parents and siblings were of average height, his paternal grandfather was said to have stood an astonishing 7 feet 8. As André grew, it became clear this wasn't just a big kid growing fast. The effects of gigantism showed up early. By the time he was 12 years old, he was already 6 feet 3. His size pushed him into adult responsibilities far too early. He performed heavy manual labor meant for grown men, long before most kids his age were thinking about their future. And like any teenager with unmatched strength, he sometimes used it for mischief. André would grab his friends' cars and physically move them, sometimes wedging them into tight spaces between buildings and street lamps just for laughs. It was playful, but it also showed how completely different his world already was. Though born in France, André's roots stretched across Europe. His mother was Polish, his father Bulgarian, and his life path would soon reflect that same sense of movement and distance. Unlike most entertainers who discover their calling on a school stage, André's journey took a much rougher route. At 14, when schooling was no longer mandatory in France, he dropped out without hesitation. There were no dreams of fame or applause. He became a farmhand, working the fields and living a simple, physically demanding life. But a body like his was never going to stay hidden for long. By 18, André realized his size wasn't just something to endure, it was something that could change his life. He moved to Paris and entered the world of professional wrestling, training under promoter Robert Laga. It didn't take long for both men to recognize what they were working with. André didn't just look different, he looked unforgettable. He debuted as Géant Ferré, a name inspired by a legendary folk hero from northern France. Almost immediately, history followed. In 1966, he faced Le Petit Prince in a match that marked the first appearance of either wrestler on French national television. It was a turning point, not just for André, but for French wrestling itself. Success came quickly. By 1968, André had captured the FFCP World Heavyweight Championship. From there, his rise became global. He toured across Europe, wrestled in the United Kingdom, Germany, Africa, and even New Zealand. Everywhere he went, the reaction was the same: disbelief, awe, and packed crowds. Eventually, his journey carried him to the place where his legend would truly explode. In 1970, André traveled to Japan to wrestle for the International Wrestling Enterprise under the name Monster Rusimov. Professionally, it was a huge leap. Medically, it changed everything. Japanese doctors diagnosed him with acromegaly, a rare condition caused by excessive growth hormone from the pituitary gland. It explained his rapid growth, but it also came with devastating consequences. According to those close to him, doctors told André, at just 23 years old, that he might not live past 40. Surgery was offered as a potential lifeline. André refused. He believed his body was something he had been given for a reason, and he chose not to alter it. Instead, he committed fully to the path in front of him, determined to turn what others saw as a curse into something legendary. At that point, time was still on his side. In his early years, André wasn't just big, he was shockingly athletic. He moved with speed and balance that seemed impossible for someone his size. He executed tombstone pile drivers with ease, holding opponents upside down before dropping to his knees in a move that looked both spectacular and terrifying. In the ring, he wasn't just a giant, he was a phenomenon. By 1971, André had conquered much of the wrestling world. North America was the final frontier. He settled in Montreal and immediately became a massive draw, selling out the Montreal Forum again and again. The crowds treated him like a living myth. But fame came with a heavy price. André's size, the very thing that made him famous, also isolated him. He hated being seen as a spectacle rather than a person. Children, in particular, struggled to separate the man from the myth. Even when he was portrayed as a hero on television, kids sometimes ran away from him in real life. André understood their fear, but it left him deeply saddened. Those closest to him saw the weight he carried. Broadcaster Gene Okerlund once recalled a quiet flight they shared. André insisted Okerlund sit beside him in first class, and during that flight, the larger-than-life persona disappeared. André spoke openly about how people stared, pointed, whispered, and laughed. He talked about children asking what kind of man he was. In that moment, the strongest man in wrestling broke down in tears. It was a rare glimpse behind the legend, revealing a deeply sensitive man who wanted nothing more than to be understood. As with all fame, the highs didn't last forever. Over time, André's constant presence in Montreal dulled the shock of his size. The crowds grew smaller. The paychecks followed. And another problem emerged. There were fewer and fewer opponents who could believably stand across the ring from him. Still, even as his drawing power declined, André found something more personal taking shape. Fame couldn't ease his pain. In the early 1970s, wrestling gave André something far more personal than titles or sold-out arenas. For the first time in his life, it gave him the possibility of a family. Around 1974, André met Jean Christensen. She was a former model working in public relations for the WWF, long before it became the WWE powerhouse fans know today. Their connection didn't spark instantly. There was no dramatic romance at the beginning, no sweeping love story. But as Jean continued to see André at work events, something slowly changed. She began to understand him beyond the spectacle. One small detail stood out to her. Jean was tall herself, and for once, she could wear high heels and still feel small standing next to someone. It may sound simple, But for André, moments like that mattered. The relationship didn't last long, but it left behind a life-altering surprise. Jean became pregnant. The news shocked everyone involved, especially because Jean believed André's medical condition made it impossible for him to have children. André himself didn't believe it at first. He denied being the father until a court-ordered blood test confirmed the truth. By the end of the decade, their daughter, Robin Christensen Rusimov, was born. Robin grew up in the United States with her mother. Jean continued working in the wrestling business, which was how she and André had crossed paths in the first place. Despite André being a massive star in the WWF and living in the same country, Robin barely saw him. She later explained that she could only remember about 5 times they were ever together, and several of those encounters happened in courtrooms rather than family settings. The relationship between André and Jean was strained, and that tension spilled over into his connection with his daughter. Still, Robin always knew exactly who her father was and what he meant to the world of wrestling. While his personal life remained complicated, André's career was about to reach an entirely new level. In 1973, he sat down with Vincent J. McMahon, the founder of the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. This meeting changed everything. McMahon signed on as André's agent and crafted a strategy that would turn him into a true global attraction. The idea was simple but brilliant. Keep him moving. By rotating André through different territories, McMahon ensured fans never became used to him. Wherever André appeared, he felt rare, special, unmissable. That constant travel, however, came at a cost. Commercial airplanes were never designed for a man André's size. He spent years flying across Europe, Africa, and Asia, crammed into seats that barely fit him. The real nightmare, though, was the bathroom. Airline lavatories were tight for the average person. For André, they were unusable. His routine became painfully strict. He would use the airport restroom just before boarding and try to hold it until landing. On short flights, it worked. On long-haul trips, it didn't. During one exhausting flight out of Tokyo, André realized he couldn't wait any longer and began to panic. The flight crew improvised. They rushed him to the back galley, strung up a large black garbage bag between drink carts, pulled the curtains closed, and gave him what little privacy they could. From that moment on, this became the routine. Whenever André had no choice, a bucket was provided, and a crew member was left with the unenviable task of disposing of it afterward. Sports Illustrated once compared André to Gulliver trapped in Lilliput, and the description couldn't have been more accurate. Everyday life was a constant struggle. Revolving doors forced him to hunch over and shuffle awkwardly just to get through. Learning to play the piano was impossible because one finger could hit 3 keys at once. Taxis required him to fold himself unnaturally just to halfway fit. Hotel bathtubs were useless. Nothing was built for him. André wasn't just larger than life, he was larger than daily life. Eventually, he realized he needed an identity that embraced reality instead of fighting it. Vincent J. McMahon had the answer. They stopped trying to minimize André's size and decided to amplify it. That was the moment André fully became André the Giant. His wrestling style changed to match the name. He abandoned quick, agile movements and adopted a slower, heavier presence that made him seem immovable. On March 24, 1973, this version of André officially debuted. After steamrolling Frank Valois and Bull Pometti, the crowd was already sold. 2 days later, at Madison Square Garden, he defeated Buddy Wolf and locked himself in as a fan favorite. Wrestling wasn't his only interest. André had caught the acting bug back in the late 1960s after appearing in a French film. and he wanted more. His American acting debut came in 1976 when he played a Sasquatch on The $6 Million Man. It was a small role, but a meaningful one. Though he always considered himself a wrestler first, André enjoyed being in front of the camera. As his career slowed, he balanced WWF commitments with television appearances, including The Greatest American Hero in 1983 and Zorro in 1991. But wrestling was still the center of his world, and by 1980, the business revolved around storylines and characters more than ever. That year, André crossed paths with a rising star named Hulk Hogan. Early on, the roles were reversed from what history would later remember. André was the heroic figure, while Hogan played the villain. Their rivalry was intense, but just as it gained momentum, André ran into trouble. In 1981, another feud took center stage, this time with Killer Khan. They were scheduled to face off on May 2nd, but André never made it to the ring. He had broken his ankle simply getting out of bed that morning. Promoters turned disaster into opportunity. Instead of canceling the story, they blamed the injury on Killer Khan, claiming he had snapped André's ankle during the match. When André returned that July, the revenge storyline was already red hot. In 1982, the wrestling world changed forever. Vincent J. McMahon sold the company to his son, Vince McMahon. The new owner introduced exclusive contracts, breaking away from the old territorial system. André agreed to the deal, staying loyal to the WWF while still being allowed to wrestle in Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling. At last, he had opponents who felt like true equals. One of the most significant rivalries of the early 1980s came against Big John Studd. They traveled the world together, battling to prove who the true giant of wrestling really was. Things turned personal when Studd and Ken Patera knocked André out and cut his hair in the ring. The payoff came on the biggest stage imaginable. At the first WrestleMania on March 31st, 1985, André challenged Studd to a body slam challenge. André won decisively, earning $15,000 in cash and throwing the money into the crowd until a manager stopped him. At WrestleMania 2, André raised the stakes again. He entered a 20-man battle royal featuring wrestlers and NFL players alike. On April 7, 1986, he eliminated Bret Hart to win, reinforcing his image as an unstoppable force. Later that year, during a match in Japan against Akira Maeda, things went off the rails. André dominated early, but quickly became drenched in sweat and visibly exhausted. Then, without warning, he stopped moving. Maeda attacked him relentlessly, trying to provoke a response. Eventually, André rolled onto his back and allowed himself to be pinned. Speculation exploded. Some believed André had been drunk. Others claimed he was sending Maeda a message for being arrogant. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. André was breaking down. By the time WrestleMania 2 had passed, the pain from his acromegaly was overwhelming. The toll on his body was no longer manageable. He requested time away from the ring. That break came at the perfect moment. As his wrestling schedule paused, André stepped into what would become the most iconic acting role of his life: Hollywood's most unlikely star. With his body finally getting a break from the punishment of the ring, André used his time away to step into an entirely different world. During his wrestling hiatus, he shifted toward Hollywood and joined the cast of the 1987 fantasy classic, The Princess Bride. Even for people who had never watched a single wrestling match, André became instantly recognizable as Fezzik, the soft-spoken giant with unmatched strength and an even bigger heart. In many ways, the role felt like fate. William Goldman, who wrote both the novel and the screenplay, later explained that André was the only person he ever imagined while writing Fezzik. Watching the finished film, it's easy to see why. André didn't feel like he was acting. He simply was Fezzik. His presence was so natural that it's almost surprising he hadn't already become a Hollywood mainstay. Before The Princess Bride, André's film career had been frustratingly narrow. Casting directors saw his size and little else. He was routinely offered roles as monsters, brutes, or exaggerated oddities, Bigfoot-like creatures, silent henchmen, or strange villains like the demon in Conan the Destroyer. This film marked a turning point. For the first time, the camera focused on his humanity rather than his height, allowing audiences to see the warmth and kindness that had always been there. Off-screen, André was exactly like Fezzik. He was gentle, generous, and deeply considerate. Cary Elwes, who played Wesley, often described him as a true gentle giant, someone who gave freely of himself even when it cost him physically. Years of brutal wrestling matches had left André's body worn down, and by the time filming began, he was in constant pain. He couldn't perform many of his own stunts, and even simple movements were difficult. Still, he showed up every day smiling, never letting his suffering dampen the mood on set. Mandy Patinkin later recalled that André loved being on set because, for once, he could simply exist without being stared at. Among cast and crew, he wasn't a spectacle. He was just another actor doing his job. But the moment filming ended and he returned to everyday life, the stares always came back. The cast adored him. Nearly everyone who worked alongside André described him as polite, patient, and unfailingly kind. One of the clearest examples of this was his relationship with Robin Wright. Between takes in freezing conditions, André would gently cup the top of her head with his massive hands to keep her warm. Because of his size, it was like wearing a giant heated helmet, and it perfectly captured his instinct to protect and care for others. Not every story from the set was tender, though. André was also known for being completely unapologetic about who he was, and that led to one of the most legendary moments in film history. During the filming of a scene, André reportedly unleashed an earth-shaking burst of gas that lasted well over 10 seconds and brought production to a full stop. Once it finally ended, director Rob Reiner asked if he was all right. André calmly replied that he was now. Behind the humor, the reality of the shoot was incredibly demanding. André was in serious pain throughout the entire production, facing physical challenges most fans never realized. One of the most iconic shots in the film shows the heroes riding away on white horses. For André, that moment required movie magic. No horse could safely support his nearly 500-pound frame, so the crew used cables and pulleys to create the illusion. The same was true for scenes where Fezzik carries other characters. André's back pain had become so severe that special rigs were needed to take the strain off his body, while preserving the visual effect on screen. Working so closely with André also gave Cary Elwes a front-row seat to his legendary tolerance for alcohol. But those long drinking sessions weren't about excess or celebration. They were about survival. André was scheduled for major surgery immediately after filming, and doctors struggled to determine safe doses of pain medication for someone his size. Alcohol became the only thing that dulled the constant pain enough for him to function. After filming wrapped, André and Elwes remained close friends. During one night out in Manhattan, Elwes noticed a man following them from bar to bar and grew concerned that André had a stalker. André, however, knew exactly what was happening. Years earlier, he had accidentally fallen onto a bystander while waiting for his car. After that incident, the NYPD decided not to take chances. Whenever André went out, an undercover officer was assigned to discreetly keep an eye on him. Rather than feeling uncomfortable, André treated the situation with good humor and generosity. He spent the entire evening buying drinks for the officer, who gladly accepted. It was a perfect snapshot of André's character: kind, amused by life's absurdities, and endlessly giving. Of all his acting roles, The Princess Bride meant the most to him. According to his friend Lanny Poffo, André would host movie nights after filming, watching the film again and again. He was proud in a way few people ever saw, eagerly asking friends what they thought of his performance, like a kid showing off a favorite achievement. While André was away filming, the WWF had to explain why its biggest attraction had disappeared. They worked his absence into an ongoing storyline involving Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy. Bobby Heenan challenged André to a tag team match, and when André didn't appear, WWF President Jack Tunney suspended him indefinitely. Once filming ended and André had time to rest, he was ready to return. There was just one problem: he was still suspended. The solution was classic wrestling theater. André returned wearing a mask as Giant Machine. It was an open secret. Everyone knew who it was, but the announcers played along, pretending they had no idea. Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, and Bobby Heenan were furious. They took their complaints straight to Jack Tunney, who issued a challenge. If they could prove André was under the mask, he would be fired immediately. They never could. By late 1986, André was officially reinstated, but he was returning to a very different reality. His body was breaking down. Doctors told him he needed major back surgery or risk losing the ability to walk. The operation was so extreme that surgeons had to create or source custom tools because standard medical equipment simply wasn't built for someone his size. Even after such an invasive procedure, André refused prescription painkillers. He had watched too many fellow wrestlers become dependent on them and wanted no part of that fate. Instead, he relied on alcohol to manage the pain. For André, drinking wasn't about partying. It was how he survived day to day. The surgery allowed him to return to the ring, but it didn't fix the problem. His pain remained severe, and reports suggested he had little feeling in his legs and could barely move. Still, André pushed on, driven by pride, loyalty, and sheer will. By the late 1980s, he found himself once again crossing paths with Hulk Hogan. This time, the roles were reversed. Hogan was now the beloved hero, and André stepped into the role of the villain. Even with his health fading, his presence was still terrifying. In 1987, Hogan was celebrating a 3-year reign as WWF World Heavyweight Champion when André joined him in the ring. What looked like a friendly moment turned tense when André crushed Hogan's hand in a handshake that caught him completely off guard. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Not long after, André was honored with a trophy recognizing him as the only undefeated wrestler in history. Hogan appeared to congratulate him, but quickly took over the spotlight. Visibly annoyed, André walked out in the middle of the moment. The final spark came when André aligned himself with his longtime enemy, Bobby Heenan. During a heated confrontation, Heenan accused Hogan of pretending to be André's friend out of fear. Hogan tried to calm things down, hoping to avoid a fight. André wasn't interested. He challenged Hogan for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 3. When Hogan struggled to process what was happening, André delivered his answer with force. He tore Hogan's shirt and crucifix from his chest, cutting his skin in the process. The message was clear. The friendship was over. But behind the scenes, beneath the power and intimidation, André was fighting a battle his body was steadily losing, even as the world watched him prepare for the biggest match of his life. The horrible death and tragic final days of André the Giant and his girlfriend. By this stage of his life, André stood around 7 feet 4 inches tall and weighed close to 520 pounds. On paper, that size sounded unbeatable. In reality, it was slowly breaking him down. Every step put crushing pressure on his joints, and simply carrying that frame had become a daily battle. As WrestleMania 3 approached, the pain grew so severe that André underwent back surgery. Even after the operation, he wasn't truly healed. To get through matches at all, he had to wear a back brace hidden beneath his singlet. When the long-building feud with Hulk Hogan finally reached its climax in 1987, André was far from his physical peak. His joints were weakened, his back was fragile, and his mobility was limited. Still, he walked into the ring. That night, Hogan did the unthinkable. He lifted André and slammed him to the mat, then followed with his running leg drop to secure the victory. That single moment was burned into wrestling history, later immortalized as the body slam heard around the world. Everyone understood that professional wrestling was choreographed. Matches were usually planned in advance, with finishes agreed upon backstage. But Hulk Hogan has always claimed that this match was different. According to him, he didn't know whether he was winning or losing until it actually happened, insisting the outcome was entirely in André's hands. That claim has always been controversial. Hogan's reputation for exaggeration makes his version hard to accept at face value. Still, wrestling has never been a normal business, especially in the 1980s. In the end, the full truth lives only with the men who stood in that ring. What mattered more was that André didn't have to wait long for revenge. The following year, chaos erupted during a February 5th episode of the main event. André managed to pin Hogan and capture the championship, but the win came with a massive asterisk. Hogan clearly kicked out before the 3 count. The reason it was ignored came down to pure wrestling trickery. The referee in the ring wasn't supposed to be Earl Hebner at all. His identical twin, Dave Hebner, had been replaced without anyone noticing. And behind the scenes, Ted DiBiase had paid Earl to make sure André got the victory. Moments later, André handed the championship straight to DiBiase. WWF President Jack Tunney stepped in immediately, voided the title change, and declared the championship vacant. That decision set up a massive tournament at WrestleMania 4. Surprisingly, neither Hogan nor André made it far. Both were eliminated in the second round after brawling to a double disqualification. Soon after, Hogan defeated André again inside a steel cage, and their legendary rivalry finally began to cool. But André wasn't finished writing his story. In the late 1980s, he entered a new feud with Jake the Snake Roberts. The storyline leaned heavily into the idea that André had a paralyzing fear of snakes. Jake exploited that fear mercilessly, unleashing his python Damien to intimidate the giant. It was psychological warfare, and it worked perfectly for television. Still, even the gentlest giants have limits. In 1989, during a match against the Ultimate Warrior in Iowa, André suddenly snapped. He went after a cameraman, locking him in a headlock and destroying his equipment. Whatever provoked it, the legal system didn't care. André was charged with assault, fined $100, and ordered to pay for the damaged gear. Despite his declining health, his career kept moving forward. To reduce the physical strain of singles competition, André teamed with Haku to form the Colossal Connection. Managed by Bobby Heenan, The pairing allowed André to maintain his aura while sharing the workload. The strategy worked. On December 13, 1989, the Colossal Connection defeated Demolition to win the WWF Tag Team Championships. For months, they dominated the division, appearing nearly unstoppable. That run ended at WrestleMania 6 on April 1, 1990. Facing Demolition once again, a mistimed and sloppy exchange cost André and Haku the titles. The loss itself wasn't shocking. What happened afterward was, Bobby Heenan exploded in frustration, berating both men in the ring. Then, in a moment no one expected, Heenan slapped André across the face. Instantly, André's easygoing demeanor vanished. He struck back just as hard, sending Heenan stumbling. The crowd erupted, but away from the spotlight, André's condition was quietly worsening. By that point, he could barely move. During that final title defense, Haku wrestled almost the entire match alone, avoiding tagging André in at all. It was the only way to protect him. Eventually, André could no longer compete full-time. His last official match came on May 11, 1991, in a 17-man battle royal. He didn't win, but he made sure the crowd remembered him. 5 months later, he made one final appearance, this time in Paris. He didn't wrestle. Instead, he stood on crutches in Davey Boy Smith's corner during a match against Earthquake. At one point, Smith grabbed one of André's crutches and used it as a weapon, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Even at the end, André knew how to create a moment. Behind the scenes, alcohol had become his main way of coping. Friends insisted it wasn't about partying. It was about pain. Because of his massive size, his tolerance was legendary. Stories followed him everywhere. Hundreds of beers in a night, bottles of wine before matches, enormous bar tabs. André himself never denied it. To him, it was simply survival. He lived with constant pain from wrestling, non-stop travel, and acromegaly, a condition that caused his bones and joints to continue growing and thickening throughout his life. While many wrestlers relied on pills, André refused. He had seen too many friends destroyed by addiction. Alcohol became his medicine, for better or worse. As his wrestling days ended, those close to him noticed a change. Without the road, without the ring, André began to withdraw. He took pride in who he was, and losing his place in the business cut deeply. Each meeting with old friends showed more decline. His legs swelled badly, his facial features thickened. Walking became agony. Still, he refused medical help, believing his fate was inevitable. In January 1993, André returned to France. He was there for a deeply personal reason. His father had passed away, and André made the difficult journey home to attend the funeral. He stayed a few extra days to celebrate his mother's birthday, choosing family over comfort. On the night of January 27th, he spent time with friends playing cards, then returned to his hotel. Sometime in his sleep, he suffered a fatal heart attack. He was found the following morning. André the Giant was gone at just 46 years old. Even after his death, his size presented challenges. He had requested cremation, but no local facility could accommodate him. His remains were flown back to the United States, where his wishes were finally honored. His ashes were scattered across his ranch in North Carolina. After his passing, Jeanne devoted herself to raising their daughter, Robin. She chose privacy over fame, protecting André's memory with quiet dignity. When Jeanne passed away in 2008, she left behind a legacy shaped by strength, grace, and love.